Let's begin with this morning's big news in the 2024 GOP race for the White House. And Senator Tim Scott expected to announce his bid next hour. NBC's Ali Vitale is in Scott's hometown of North Charleston, South Carolina. Also with us, Rob Godfrey, former spokesperson for then South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, who's already in the 2024 race, and Juanita Tolliver, MSNBC political analyst and host of the What a Day podcast with Crooked Media. Great to have all of you here. Ali, kick us off. You've covered Tim Scott in Washington. What can we expect from this announcement coming in less than an hour from now?
Well, look, this is Tim Scott really stepping into his own. When I'm in my other day job as a Capitol Hill correspondent, we see him in the halls there. He is one of several. Now here, of course, he's going to be stepping into his own limelight as a presidential candidate. And he's joining a field that isn't crowded at this point, but is likely to get a lot more crowded over the course of this week. I think what's going to be fascinating about Tim Scott's candidacy is the way that his advisors have told me he's going to try to fit into this race. He's not going to do it by lobbing attacks against his opponents. He's not going to be heavy on the contrast, at least not in this opening salvo. Instead, we're going to see a lot of the senator presenting himself to the American public, going heavy on his bio. He's here, of course, at his alma mater for this announcement in his home state of South Carolina. Of course, that is going to factor heavily into his candidacy, into his story. But he's also going to lean heavily on his faith. You see it there on the banner behind me. He was doing during his exploratory phase of this, his Faith in America tour. Now that is becoming, of course, an official presidential candidacy. And we're going to see him lean heavily on that, as his advisors tell me that the contrast for Scott is not going to come in terms of message compared to Trump and others in the field. Instead, it's going to come with Scott as a messenger, leaning heavily, of course, on his personal story. I do think, though, there's an interesting little bit of politics here, and we can talk about more of how this impacts the larger landscape of the race in a little bit. But there is an interesting endorser here this morning. The number 2 Senate Republican, John Thune, is going to be here at this event. I'm told he's going to be speaking, and he will be endorsing Senator Tim Scott, a man who is beloved by his Senate colleagues in Washington, and now getting that love in the form of some endorsements, Anna.
And so, Rob, we do know Scott is a deeply religious man, which Ali mentioned. He has strong views on abortion. How do you see his faith impacting his policy priorities, and what kind of campaign would you expect to see?
Well, it's a tremendously proud day for the people of South Carolina to see another person from our state, another one of our public officials, jump into the presidential race. Senator Scott's faith, his personal story has always been compelling. He's always been a great messenger when it comes to talking about those things. And what it is it's a real contrast because when he, whether he's talking about his faith or he's campaigning as he did 8 years ago with Senator Rubio and Governor Haley, what he does is he brings people together. He's uplifting. He presents, as Governor Haley does, a stark contrast to the kind of the grievance-filled characters we see, from some other leaders of the party. And so what I think we'll see is Senator Scott lean heavily into these things because there is strength. But make no mistake, while he will absolutely lean into his faith and his personal story, he has a strong record. He has a background in business. He has a background as a policymaker, whether it's opportunity zones that have lifted people up and given them opportunities to run businesses of their own. He's a school choice advocate to make sure that people have the opportunity to go to schools regardless of where they're born. He's absolutely a fiscal conservative. He's got a wide range of issues that he's become well known for. So Senator Scott has a number of things to offer this race, and I think they'll be uplifting things and not personality driven. They'll be policy driven.
We'll see. Juanita, Scott is the only black Republican senator. He's the only black American to serve in both chambers of Congress. And we know that black Americans overwhelmingly vote Democratic, with 92% of black voters backing Joe Biden in 2020, according to the Pew Research Center. But take a listen to what Senator Cory Booker told our colleague here at NBC and MSNBC, Jen Psaki.
What should people who are intrigued by his presidential aspiration know about him?
I think that as I look at this Republican field, he may be one of those people that is underestimated.
Juanita, is this someone Joe Biden should be worried about?
I think Senator Booker is a very kind senator, but absolutely not, just based on the voter breakdown that you mentioned before, Anna, with 92% of black voters going Democrat, less than 8% going Republican in 2020. I think that's something that's going to stand no matter what Senator Scott says, largely because of his voting record aligning with Trump and Republicans, MAGA Republicans, so heavily in the Senate, right? Like, that's what can't be lost here is the substance. But let's be real. When you think about Republican primary voters, substance isn't something that they think a lot about. Character of candidates isn't something they think about, especially when a recent NBC poll showed that 2/3 of Republican primary voters are still looking to back Trump in spite of all of the scandals, in spite of all of the indictments and investigations. And so that's what I think is ultimately going to rise to the top here. But I do want to go back to the endorsement that you mentioned of Senator Thune, which is a huge deal because that shows that Tim Scott is the pick of conservatives at this moment. But again, when you think about the makeup of the GOP primary and the red meat that those primary voters want in terms of abortion bans, against LGBTQ individuals, bans against teaching basic Black history even, I think there's still going to be a cap and a limit on how far Tim Scott is going to be able to get in this race.
We also know DeSantis is expected to join the race this week. Allie, how does this growing GOP field impact the current frontrunner, Donald Trump?
Well, look, the Trump team has long said, and most of the sources in Republican politics I have agree with it, that the larger this field gets, the better it is for Donald Trump. And so the fact that you're seeing not just Senator Tim Scott jump in this week, but the man who we've all widely assumed to be the number 2 in this field, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, he's also likely to jump in this week. But there are several other names, too, Anna, as well. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, current North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. Of course, we're still waiting to see what Trump's former VP Mike Pence ends up doing. There are a lot of names in this mix right now, and I think that what the Trump team's read on this is, and they put this out when they saw Senator Scott file his statement of candidacy on Friday before the weekend, they said that in their view, the fact that more people are jumping in is a sign that other Republicans see that second place is wide open. Now, that's a dig at DeSantis, who they see as faltering and who has had some missteps over the course of the last few months as he's sort of played footsie with a presidential bid. But the fact that you're going to see this field widen, I think, A, gives Republicans more options, but B, when you talk about the polling that Juanita is referencing, it's not exactly clear to me that the majority of Republican voters want more options. Many of them, at this point at least, know Trump, believe in Trump, and may want to see him be the nominee again. Of course, once they're able to start putting people side by side, we'll see if that support peels off. But every single source, every single candidate in this race knows that that's their charge right now. They got to find a way to peel off Trump voters.
It is very early, obviously, but there is a growing list of Republicans who don't think Trump can catch that lightning in a bottle again. Take a listen to what Republican Senator Bill Cassidy had to say about Trump's record in swing states.
So if past his prologue, that means President Trump is going to have a hard time in those swing states, which means that he cannot win a general election.
So, Juanita, if you take what Cassidy is saying and you believe Trump can't win a general election, I wonder, can any Republican?
Based on them running on themes of hatred and harm and, let's be real, inhumane policies, again, targeting pregnant people and women, targeting LGBTQ individuals, it's not looking good for Republicans. They fully overplayed their hand in their commitment to these bans and these policies, which we know much of the population supports, right? They want to make sure that LGBTQ individuals have protections. They want to make sure women and pregnant people can access basic health care in the form of an abortion. And every single time a state puts out another one of these bans, consider that a hit on all Republicans going into a general election. And when you add that on top to the fact that Republicans are going to spend the next year hitting each other, spending millions and millions of dollars on that, whereas President Biden is going to come in here without having to scrap with anyone else, that puts Democrats in a positive position.
Juanita Tolliver, Ali Vitale, and Rob Godfrey, thank you all. Appreciate the discussion.